Next question kind of goes into more of your performances. In your recent solo performances, you've highlighted a lot Latin American composers and music by women composers, and music that you've transcribed or arranged yourself. Could you tell us a bit about some of the most recent pieces you've played that you particularly liked, and how you went about programming these concerts?
Sure. Well, my life really changed when I moved out here to Iowa. Um, let's just say the freelancing scene in Cedar Falls, Iowa is a little bit different than that of Washington, D.C. area where I was living before this. So I found myself doing a lot less gigs, especially considering that about 6 months after I got here, we entered a pandemic. And a lot more solo playing. So I started to try to put together performances just of music that I was inspired by. So recently, I'm about to do another December, and I'm playing the Concerto for Tuba and Heavy Metal by Evan Ziegel. Actually, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, and I need to ask him, but I'm playing that coming up. So my upcoming recital is I'm kind of finally getting back into chamber playing. So I'm going to be playing the suite for horn, tuba, and piano by Barbara York with Jessica Pierce, who's at Eastern Illinois University. She's a member of my brass quintet. I'm going to be playing a new work for euphonium and horn duo. I'm going to be playing a trumpet tuba duo. I'm going to be playing a piece for tuba, string bass, piano, and marimba called Murder Hornets Be Damned. So this next recital is kind of all about the chamber side of things, getting back into this. But in the past year, my projects have been, one, I arranged a piece by Lily Boulanger for tuba. It was originally for flute, and I also wrote a piece in 2020 during my lockdown. I wrote a piece for tuba, an electronic track. So those maybe can give you a little bit more info about my my inspirations, on that side of things. As far as arranging music, I often look to either vocal music or flute music, and I came across this piece, De Matin de Printemps by Lily Boulanger, as part of Laura Colgate, who's a violinist, played it. And I got in touch. I kind of knew her from the Boulanger Initiative, which she started in DC when I was living there. So I kind of came across her and her piece and her videos. It's a piece originally for flute and or violin. So I wrote a version of it for tuba, and it's actually a remarkably flexible piece. If you look at the flute version and the violin version, the octaves are often displaced. So to me, I take that to mean that I can displace them a couple more octaves and kind of make something that that makes sense linearly on the tuba. So that's just a really great piece that I wanted to have the opportunity to play. And for tuba players, we just don't get to do that unless we arrange it ourselves. The piece that's a project that's been a long time in the making. I enjoy taking recordings of soundscapes in places that I travel to. One of the places that I had traveled to was Ecuador, and I took a bunch of recordings, made a bunch of recordings on my little Zoom recorder of various things like street sounds, animal sounds, stuff, the beach, things like that, the boardwalk at the beach. And then I edited them into tracks, and then I put music along with that. So that's the direction that a lot of tuba music is going right now. A lot of people are playing pieces with recorded accompaniment, and what I was doing there was kind of like an unaccompanied piece. Almost the writing was sort of like unaccompanied tuba, but inspired by the sounds. And in one case, using an Ecuadorian folk song for part of that piece. So those are kind of the projects that I've done. To answer the part about programming, one thing that I do try to do is include multiple instruments on a program. So sometimes this is not possible because of the timing or because I need to travel or whatever. Nobody's trying to take, two tubas on a plane. But I like to feature the big tuba, the contrabass tuba, alongside the tuba. So in my last recital, I played that piece by Lily Boulanger, but I also played the piece by Wayne Liu called Thrust, which is a really good, like big tuba piece, totally different. So I look for contrast in instruments or contrast in instrumentation like around me. So my upcoming recital actually is all F tuba and euphonium, but the instruments around me will be constantly changing. So that one's going to be kind of rough, like as far as like it's going to be kind of a blow, but there will be stage changes and different things going on. So I'm usually looking for contrast, and then kind of lining things up so that the listener has contrast with every piece, and then ideally so that I have contrast with what I'm doing for each piece.
People like I hear a lot of young like college students playing a lot more with like electronic tracks and things like that, and messing around with electronic music. So that's super cool for like young musicians.
Yeah, one thing I totally forgot to mention right there is like, I got into that much more during the pandemic, but one of the things that I did on my last recital and on my recital at IWBC is a piece for tuba and loop pedal or loop station. So there's some really good stuff along those lines coming out right now. I played a piece by John Cipher, who he wrote it for himself on trombone, and then I basically just begged him to make me a tuba version of the piece, and he's now done 2 of these for me. And that has been, I think it's been a product of the way tuba music was going, and then I think the pandemic accelerated that trajectory for a lot of people, because like I said, I was just here in my office like by myself. So yeah, like I loop station, I got, pieces for tuba and CD accompaniment, and I did a whole recital of just that, in 2021. So I think it's kind of a mix of those things, plus add in a little sprinkle of tubists have trouble, finding accompanists sometimes in the first place. So yeah, it's a real movement, and I'm happy about that personally.
Do you have any advice for people who kind of want to get into those types of things? Maybe things to listen to or try, like maybe a program on their computer, anything to help people who are interested in that kind of area?
Um, if you're interested in getting into tuba with electronic accompaniment, I would say that there are the easiest entry point are the pieces that are just, for tuba, for your instrument, tuba, euphonium, whatever, plus CD accompaniment. So for example, I played a piece, there's a piece called Dyadic Affinities, that's with accompaniment, but it's like you have to run it on Max through your computer. That's a little bit more complex. So maybe as an entry point, you're looking for something where you are just you're putting on CD accompaniment and you're playing along with it, as opposed to something where you have like that piece had like a click track in my ear and then you're hearing something else through the speakers. So there are a ton of great pieces out there for that. I actually had a student who did his undergrad thesis here on that, and he played for example, there's a piece by Peter Meakin called Floating Dreams. Like there's stuff like that. There's a piece by Alice Gomez that is for tuba and accompaniment, things that you can just throw on and play and listen to and keep going. What I recommended to a grad student recently were the Sam Palafian pieces, Relentless Grooves. Those are good. And those are maybe an entry point if you're like, I want to play something with CD, but I don't want it to sound like, I don't want it to sound like dated electronic sounds, which some pieces that were originally written for that, they do now sound a little bit dated, although I'm pretty sure give it 20 minutes and they'll sound cool again, maybe by next year. So there are so many great like entry points for that, and I would strictly I think Cimarron Press has a fair amount of those like on their website, and you can find this stuff through Ycaza as well, but like just go out there and try to recordings of people doing this stuff, and then get into it. One other one that I'll mention is I guess former IWBC president Joanna Hersey has a piece that I also just played recently, the piece for visual score and tuba, which is called 1112. So that's another one that's like very simple entry point because it's a drone with sounds, but you don't have to time anything that you're doing with that. And then I would also say for euphonium players, Neil Corwell, I think the he has some good stuff on his website for euphonium and electronics.